Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Digitalk Architects. Today on our episode, we have Rohit Shukla from Larta. He is going to spend the next, hopefully, 40 minutes with us. Rohit, please go ahead and tell us about yourself, your company, all of your experience.
Wow, that's a big thing.
That's a big one, right?
I founded I founded this organization in 1993. It's a hybrid organization. It's a nonprofit, very engaged in innovation. We do have a for-profit arm that's focused on specific kinds of programs. We've had an extensive engagement in the state of California, going back to the .com time in the state's history, and then as a national partner to federal agencies. And you may know that federal agencies in the US have a very strong involvement with small companies that are coming up with innovative ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Fund them. This is mainly science-based. They fund them to be able to develop new concepts, innovative concepts. And then there needs to be some kind of intermediary to help these remarkable research-oriented, scientific-based companies to commercialize their products and services. So that's what we've done for the last 25 of the 32 years that we've been around. Mm-hmm. And then 5 years ago, just before the pandemic, we decided all of the learnings that we'd had, all of the methodologies that we had developed into a book of knowledge and learning, we wanted to apply that in a local context in our hometown, Los Angeles, because it is the most diverse community in the country, both in terms of population and in terms of diversity of industry and so on. So we brought those learnings back to LA and started two community programs, one focused on health innovation for health and wellness, and the other one focused on climate adaptation, community resilience, all of the issues associated with urban living, including food, water, energy. And those two programs are now really well established and have remarkably well in terms of community goodwill and understanding. So basically what I'm saying to you is we are an innovation hub across the entire spectrum of science-based, technology-oriented companies. And that includes food and ag, healthcare and wellness and bioscience, energy and water, in particular oceans and other sources of water. So those areas are major areas for us. And it's become a collection of remarkable innovations that we have been curating for the last 32 years.
Okay. Hey, it's a good introduction. You've been doing this a long time, so it deserves a long introduction, right? You can't, 30 years? 30 years since you founded your company, but that's not all your experience, right?
No, 32 years, actually.
What was the deciding factor back then to start your company? Where were you at that time? And then what made you decide to go nonprofit into founding your company, which is pretty significant today?
Yes. So I'll take you back to a time when you were not born, I know.
Thanks.
92, 93. The first Gulf War had just ended, and the US federal government decided that it was going to invest in what came to be known as the peace dividend, where they would take all the monies that they had invested in defense and make it much more applicable to commercial civilian enterprises and civilian pursuits. And so what happened was California, which was ground zero for aerospace and defense, lost an enormous amount of value, right?
Okay.
800,000 jobs were lost in a matter of 1 year. It's more significant than many people have remembered. Much more significant is what happened in 2008 in the financial crisis around the world. This is very specific to the US and very specific to California, which was the ground zero, as I said, for aerospace and defense, manufacturing of airframes, of aircraft, of missile systems, rocketry, and so on. And as a consequence of that, the state, which has always veered from being broke to being flush, did not have the resources to be able to command a huge kind of reinvention of the economy. So they decided, you know what, we have a small amount of money. We'd like to be able to invest it in the development of new enterprises. This was after we had approached the state about the need to be able to uncover innovation and entrepreneurship in the regions around California. So they
Right.
set up a program, which I helped to put together, to create 3 nonprofits. And they were the ones who came up with this. They had to be nonprofits because they had to be neutral in many cases. They had to be able to
Yep.
have respect of a whole range of stakeholders, from regular businesses to universities to governments, etc.
Hmm.
And Arta became the most prominent of those 3 nonprofits that were established in 1993. And that's what started our journey, right? So we were focused in California for the first 10 years, for the first 10 years, then went national with our story, with our capability, with our networks, etc. And that has then pushed us into a range of new kinds of offerings across the country and the world.
Awesome. Yeah. So you've gone through, a bunch of different stages of economy in your company. We are now at the sort of intersection of, so we went industrial, computer revolution, and now we are in the intersection of AI. You are in, probably a really good position with your company and a lot of the stuff you do in your day to day with your nonprofit. We talk a lot about digital marketing, business development, and the impact of AI, which is that intersection. From your experience, what are the most essential steps for guiding entrepreneurs from breakthrough ideas to successfully commercial ventures in today's market? That's part of what you do day to day. I'm sure you have lots to share with us.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge, huge thing. So, first of all, to recognize that regardless of the fruits of the labor behind AI, which has become something of an all encompassing term, the development of a company and the evolution of a company is a body contact sport. You have to be
Right,
engaged with everything, right? You
right,
cannot expect that, say, AI as a tool is going to help you salvage if you don't have anything there, salvage what you can. You got to be able to determine what the precept is. What is your thesis? Why
hmm,
are you developing this thesis? What is the problem you're trying to resolve? Who else is doing this? How can you integrate with what is already being done, right? How do you
right,
get yourself known? What are the essential people you need around you? What kinds of networks would you intersect with in order to make yourself known, whether you're using digital marketing tools or you're using your own personal, your own personality, essentially. And you've got to be able to make sure that the company that you are developing
hmm,
reflects your own values. You cannot
right,
impose values simply by bringing it out of thin air using AI, for example, to help you put this together, right? You've got to be able to have the essence of it built into your DNA, which becomes the
yeah,
DNA of the company. And many companies fail because they think they can import these things and just put them in place. You got to feel it. As an entrepreneur, as a founder, you got to feel it. You've got to be able to develop it. You've got to be able to, put everything that you have into it. That's why I call it a body contact sport. It's like wrestling. Your
right,
wrestling is like in sumo wrestling when they're oiled bodies, right? You're constantly glistening and you're constantly moving around and you're gliding. It is what you have to go through. I mean, we've been through probably 6 evolutions, 6 pivots in our time.
yep,
And you've seen this yourself. I mean, I know in the companies you work with. So,
hmm,
bottom line is recognize that it is going to take a lot from you, but it needs to, because it needs to reflect your personality, your values, your understanding of the world, your ability to rationalize why you're doing what you're doing, what is the problem you're trying to resolve, who are the people doing it already in other ways. Because one thing you hear, as you know, Carolina, you hear this all the time, right? A company would say, nobody else has done this. Nobody else has come up with it. We're the only ones
almost all
doing
of them.
it. Yeah, almost all of them. You know what? It's actually good for them to be able to think that way because it forces you into recognizing ultimately the kind of folly of that kind of that kind of thinking. It is absolutely fallacious to think that you're the only one who comes up with anything, because somebody has come up with something that maybe in a
Yeah.
different context, in a different use case. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the things I would say are most essential in being able to use the kinds of tools that are available right now. And I know you're going to bring up AI, and you've already brought it up. And I think, one of the
Okay,
issues that,
hugely.
yeah, one of the issues that I have is that people think they can just simply use an AI tool to give them things that they didn't have.
Interesting.
And I would say, which is why I said you got to be able to have it reflect you and reflect your values. And AI can help you in the following way. AI is an extraordinary aggregation tool that applies a tremendous amount of depth to be able to analyze anything, right? We know this, right? We know this for.
Mm-hmm.
There
Yep.
is so much out there in terms of bodies of knowledge that you can tap into using AI. It can be an extremely good assimilation tool in giving you the essence of what you can bring in to your own company. But it's only an organizing planning tool. It is not an execution tool, at least not in the work that we do. I can see how it can be an execution tool, for example, in being able to, let's say, develop a drug, right? Or, for example, finding ways of being able to identify areas of problem areas in, let's say, oil fields, right? Very practical, specific kinds of manufacturing issues. AI can be extraordinarily helpful. But the kind of work that we do, where we're dealing with ideas, we're dealing with innovations, we're dealing with solutions to
Yeah.
major issues, AI is a tool specifically to assimilate what is out there already, to bring the
Yes.
essence of what is out there to bear on your value proposition, on your
Right.
statement of purpose, on your reason for being, on being able to give you research on what's going on, who's doing what and to whom, how are they doing it, what are the pathways to be able to do this, and then see what kinds of resources you have to make it work, right? So it's
Yes.
purely a tool to bring stuff in for you then to be able to execute against. So that's what I would say. I know I've,
It's not a tool that's going to give you new ideas. The new
yeah,
ideas still have to come from the people. It's purely, I mean, in a sense, most of it's based on previous experience, right? It needs to have previous knowledge. It's not generating net new knowledge, right?
yeah. And, I know people will say, Carolina, that it is. And I will tell you,
Oh no.
I can guarantee you 5 years or 10 years from now, 3 years from now, we will recognize that it is effectively a tool that we need to be able to use. But that, the whole point of it controlling us, as you know, the big debate on AI having its own intelligence and so on and so forth, is a
Yeah.
misnomer. Is a misnomer. I mean, I think it's a misnomer because the fact of the matter
Okay.
is, if you start to do that, and you think that it's going to replace anything that you do, then you know what?
Hmm.
You haven't done enough work on your own. It is not,
The fair
as
point.
you said earlier, it's not a substitute, right? For what you need
Hmm.
to be use it for. So you were absolutely right. You cannot just assume it's going to do these things for you. It's got to
Yeah.
reflect your own thinking and your own values.
I mean, the way I see it at this point in time, yeah, we don't know what the future will bring, but at this point today, end of 2025, it cannot come up with new ideas of its own. It can only uh, base its knowledge on previous knowledge,
Exactly.
previous experiences that have been shared
Correct.
somewhere
Correct.
online. Yeah,
Correct. But
so,
you also know,
we agree on that.
yeah, you also know this, Carolina. If it can come up with its own stuff, right? That's based on what it's seeing out there, and very often it hallucinates. It brings up
Yes.
nonsense. It brings up
Hmm.
complete crap, right? That has zero bearing. And unfortunately, the fact that we become so attached to almost like a crutch means
Hmm.
that you remember the old saying in the computer language, garbage in, garbage out.
Oh, it's still true to this day.
It's still true to this day.
It's still true to this day.
It's
I
amazing.
was
It's
just
still
having this
true.
conversation yesterday with somebody said the output of the LLMs in basically any AI tool you use today, it's only as good as the input you give it. And
Absolutely.
what we mean by that is if your prompt is crappy and generic, your output is going to be crappy and generic.
So, you
If
just
your
answered the
prompt,
question, right? Yeah, you just answered
yeah,
the question so brilliantly. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you haven't put the work in to thinking through some of the stuff that you want, you're going to get absolutely useless things, right? And you know this from your own experience in digital marketing. Very often, hallucinations become the behavior of AI, of any AI tool. And you've seen, my gosh, the hallucinations I've seen. And I have to be, that's why the prompts are so important. You're absolutely right. And I tell it right up front whenever I'm querying an AI tool, whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI or even the new Sora, whatever the case might be, I have to say, give me the exceptions. Give me as much as you possibly can with evidence. I want to be able to have them cited. You need to
yep.
give me the worst and the best and why. Right. And I also add in there, by the way, something in a totally natural language kind of process. I will be the judge.
That's a good one. I have this lady I followed, and she talks about the prompting, right? And you're prompting. So what most people are used to, and I talk a lot about this, especially recently, it's they're used to just asking quick questions, right? But they don't elaborate into it. So that lady talks a lot about, the exceptions, how you want it to respond to you. You almost always want it to indicate to the LLM, whichever one you use, to challenge you on
You're so right. You're so right.
your own thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because if there's one thing that most people agree on is they tend to agree with you because they've kind of play nice, right?
Yeah.
So you want them not to play nice and challenge you, and you want to challenge it as well, right? Like it's not just ABC, it could be CBD, it could be so just give me different points of view and whatever. And so there's this other guy. God, you're figuring out I consume a lot of content, but that's I always say that's part of my job description. Actually, my job description is to consume a lot of content so I can then educate people on it and transfer that into the work we do for our clients, right? So, anyways, there is this other guy, and he was talking about how he is doing prompting today. And it's not just, you have your little ChatGPT window. Well, it's not just that, right? A prompt can be, and this is so real, a prompt can be a full-on conversation with the LLM. Because as you know, all the main ones at least allowed you to have conversations,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this guy went on to explain like he was doing some sort of business planning. And he said, I just went for a walk, and through my walk, which was 40 minutes long, I just conversed with the LLM, right? Back and forth. And then at the end, so the whole conversation was the prompting, right? And then at the end, the LLM spit out sort of like the plan of this business thing he wanted, right? But in essence, his whole prompt took 40 minutes of a conversation. And it's not, and the conversation could be typing, but it could also be, an actual conversation.
Back
ChatGPT
and
will
forth.
answer back. You will, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting, a different way of doing prompting, but it's prompting nonetheless, right?
Yeah.
So prompting, again, back to where we started, prompting is the information and how much you feed into the LLM to ultimately get the better answer based on not just data knowledge, but your input, what you said, your values, your reasoning, your all of you
That's right.
into that information, right?
Exactly. That's why, Carolina, you're going to see a lot of crap coming out in the next few years. And the same rules apply as they always have, that if you're just because you are seeing the upending of business models, the upending of the way things are normally done, and you're seeing a lot of upstarts get their way through, like OpenAI did, right? Or Anthropic did, right? I'm talking about the AI world now.
Yeah,
In the
yeah,
regular world of innovation, there's always going to be a place for disruption, no question about it, right? But look at the
yeah.
kind of consolidation that is occurring right now, right? And recognize that these are part of the immutable rules of the world. You're going to
Yeah.
have a tendency towards monopolies that will develop
Yes.
anytime
Hugely.
you're in constantly. And so I think the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think the premise behind what AI can do for you seems to be that we can make ourselves known in ways that have never been known before. I'm talking about from the mouth of a small company, right? And I've heard this. I've heard
Hmm.
in entrepreneurs say this. We can do things that nobody would ever expect it from us. And you know what? Your thinking on that mirrors everybody else's thinking on that. And you don't seem to recognize that you still have to compete. And you
Yes.
cannot compete by expecting AI to be your competitive advantage. That is not enough. It is a
Mm.
tool. It's a tool again. And so
Yeah.
this, I mean, look, we've had, I think I haven't mentioned this to you, Carolina, but we have worked with closely, and I'm talking about closely now, 6,500 companies, 6,500 companies across those
That's
domains,
amazing.
you know. So I can tell you, if I were an AI engine, I
Hmm.
would be able to look at patterns. I would be able to look at insights. I would be able to look at the bulk grand total and come up with a whole range of things. And in fact, we have. But AI can
Right.
be really useful to us because it can go and do that analysis without the kind of tedium that you would expect, even
Hmm.
if I'm expert algorithm coder. It
Yeah.
can be a lot more efficient in doing so. So I'm a great fan for that purpose, being able to tap into what already exists by way of knowledge and research and understanding and so on, and seeing what patterns might emerge without the fact. And this is very important because you've already said this. You can't just sit there and expect you to spit it out without
Yeah.
engaging in conversation and telling. And I've actually challenged it. So when they come back with an answer, I'm like, you're hallucinating. I do not expect you to do that again. Because if you do that again, this is what I've actually done. Okay. If you do that again, I
Hmm.
will stop this session. You said something very interesting, right? You said something very interesting. You said it's almost like it wants to please you, right? It
It
wants.
does. It wants to. It wants to. I read a whole article on it actually recently. And this so I read the article that this person I was talking about earlier mentioned, right? Where because Google and all the big companies are constantly coming out with new information on behavior of the LLMs, right? And it is well known now that they like to please people because that's what makes people comfortable, right? So part of what you have to tell them is don't please me, right? You have to please me. Just tell me the real information and, in a sense, don't be biased to me, right? Just give me the good and the bad,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
if I don't
exactly.
like it, right?
Exactly. But you see, most people don't do that. A lot of people don't do that.
Or you say that they probably like listen, I'm not shy that most people that know me know that I use it. Like I have most of them in the pay version for our jobs and my company, but just because it's good to have and to see what comes out of each of them, right? And we use them for different purposes. So I'm very familiar with, all the big ones, like I said, we paid for them. And so I'm open to say like I use it all the time, every day, right? And we use them for I'm going to tell you this. So I just used that we were having this huge debate in our company with one of our accounts about their paid ad digital strategy for 2026, right? And so we were talking. Most of my team was like very sad on this is B2B in the ad tech industry. So it's like LinkedIn. I'm like, I know, like let's go somewhere else, right? Like it's not working in LinkedIn. So why keep beating it, right? Let's trace. Oh, so I'm like, I want to try something else. So I've been talking to this other person and he's talking about how he's doing B2B in Meta. So I went there, right? And so I then grabbed ChatGPT. I'm like, help me, right? Like, I want to prove why this could work, right? And so, I started talking to ChatGPT, and we started talking back and forth on, like, I want like Meta, but I also want like some sort of LinkedIn, and we're going to definitely do Google Ads. You gotta be sort of like everywhere these days, right? And so, I had this full conversation, right? And like middle of the funnel or top of the funnel, or put this, LinkedIn in here and Meta there. And I'm like, initially when he gave it to me, it's nothing what I ended up with at the end of like my strategy, but it was a full-on conversation. And that's what I was saying earlier. So it was a full-on conversation that went on back and forth. It's like, give me this and give me that. And I'm, why is this good? And why? And then, you take opinions of real people, real experiences, right? And then yesterday, I was having a different conversation with somebody else. This person mentions like, um, was talking about, using AI not just to gather information like we're doing right now, like I'm explaining, but you can now take these, AI agents and use them. And she said this, and I thought it was super cool. And I'm actually going to try and figure this out and do it myself for my company and my clients. Like do test runs with, I think she called them synthetic test runs for like your ads, where you're creating like agents that are acting like people to test your audience without actually having to go and spend the money on them. Like,
It's really
in a
interesting.
sense, like it's really interesting, right?
Yeah, very
And I
interesting.
hadn't I thought about it or talked about it until yesterday. I'm like, now I'm going to go replay my entire podcast so I can understand this better, go do it for all these campaigns. But so back to your conversation is the prompting, and everything we're talking about is like full on conversations, right? It's challenging, it's asking the LLMs to challenge you, and then you challenge them back with your bias, your perceptions, your knowledge. It still has to be you, right? And so it's, to the next point, it's not going to replace us. It's definitely going to make it smarter if we use it properly, and help us, with this ocean of information that we now have
That's
ready.
that's the biggest opportunity, I think, is there is so much out there that has been assembled in the course of human research and understanding, and it's not available to all of us all the time, right? One of the
Of
greatest
course,
things around us for us right now is in the speed at which we can. I'll give you an example of something that I think,
access information.
yeah, that everybody understands. The development of the mRNA vaccine. Okay,
Yep.
the reason why you had the ability for us to be able to come up with the COVID vaccine in such a
Hmm.
record amount of time is, I mean, the basis for the analysis had been around for quite some time. But the fact that they were able to bring it together in 10 months
Yep.
had three basic reasons. Number one, there was a breakthrough in understanding the structure of the cell and the corona structure. So that was clearly an intellectual breakthrough. But then all of the accompanying things that go with the antiviral technologies, including CRISPR and Cas9, which are very specific to virology and bacteria in particular, and how bacteria combat viruses. That knowledge, which was worldwide and was being used in different places across the world, was synthesized and brought together in a short period of time. This
Yep.
was a remarkable use case for the power of AI. Really remarkable. And this is early on, right? This is
Yeah,
this
very early on.
years ago. So even at that time, the fact that they were able to synthesize all of this and bring it together from disparate
Yep.
teams across the world that had been operating in silos was a
Hmm.
remarkable tribute to what can happen when AI is used for those particular purposes, right? To assimilate knowledge, to sift through knowledge, to be able to bring out new insights that you will be able to use, that you need to
Yeah.
be able to push. It's not going to give them to you. It's just going to give you what it has been able to see by way of patterns and insights from the patterns. And then you've got to
Hmm.
be able to do that and make it work. So it's not a lazy man's tool for damn sure. And
No, it isn't.
I think you're going to see a lot of fallout from companies and businesses and innovators and entrepreneurs who think that it is their salvation, that it is their ticket to fortune.
Well, it will help, but it won't do it for you.
No, like you said, right? It's just, it's true. Yeah.
Okay, so through your, over the years, you through your company have helped other companies raise billions of dollars and um, successfully commercialize their innovation. What do you think it's, whether it's building partnerships, leveraging expertise in, their networking centric models? What do you think is the more critical part for driving these startups' growth?
So I'll tell you, one of the answers that many successful entrepreneurs will give you is that it's all due to their brilliance and their incredible insight that this has happened, right? I think that may be true for extraordinary geniuses like Leonardo da Vinci. I don't find a similar kind of case that I can make in our world, frankly. Okay. Call me old fashioned, but I think Leonardo was perhaps one of the last. Nikolai Tesla would be another one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge in multiple schemes, was himself able to sift through all of them. The problem I think that people are going to have is to recognize that you cannot do this on your own. You do it
Okay.
through, this is where the network centric model comes in. You've got to do it through a network, understanding that is the case. So what are the main issues that will enable you to commercialize something? And I already pointed to some of them earlier, right? Where does this stand in the development of stuff in this particular field, whatever field it is, right? Everybody likes to believe that they've come up with a glorious insight that is going to make a huge difference to the entire world, right? The truth of the matter
Yeah.
is you got to be able to see what problem you're resolving, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, who else is doing this? How is it
Mm-hmm.
being perceived, and used?
Right.
What are the elements that have gone into what that person has done or those people have done, that team has done? What are the value points that they have made available to the people that are buying from them? And then by doing that, constructing your own value proposition that is so clear in terms of the matrix that you're looking at, it fits right there in the middle of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that has many, many things that go with it. And then getting out there. Now, the getting out there is after
It's the
you do
hard
all
part.
after you do all of this, which by the way, we help them do. We quiz them much like you would quiz AI. We're quizzing them, right?
Okay.
Everything is Socratian, Socrates dialogue, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And remember, this is not about the ideas. This is about the people. Because rarely is interest projected on an idea. It is projected on the person behind the idea anymore, right? The person is absolutely paramount. You cannot carry an idea forward unless you're able to get people to believe and trust and be confident in you, not just the
Yes.
intellectual point of the idea. So you do all of this initial work, and then you got to get out and synthesize all the things that you've come up with in a very specific way to be able to engage partners, and you need partners. So it's not about money. I mean, we are not the kind of organization that says, oh, we're so enamored of venture capital that that's what you need to do. You need to go and get venture capital. First of all, let me just tell you, I've been around long enough to know that venture capital is entirely cyclical. You'll see long periods of time when there's a tremendous amount of capital raised, and the top tier folks will always be top tier. There's never going to be a Sequoia or a benchmark in the venture capital world. The rest of them are like minnows, like lemmings, all
Mm-hmm.
around trying to find money. And look what happened last year. The worst year for venture capital in 50 years.
I did not know that.
Incredible down rounds, tremendous loss of value by companies who were not able to
Okay.
raise money,
Yeah.
went through a lot, and it ended up being that not only do you cede control, which is okay, you need to be able to understand that this is not something that you can hang on to forever. You've got to be able to share with people who are going to make a difference, whether it's a capital provider or a partner. You cannot just hold this to
Yeah.
yourself. Small companies and entrepreneurs in particular, they want to be able to hold on to everything as long as they can. And there are some great successes of people who've done that well. But for the most majority of people, you're not going to be able to do that,
Hmm.
because you don't have the wherewithal to execute to the level that you want. You need those
Right.
partners, you need the capital. So my point is, in getting out to people, you have to recognize that there's a network of folks, and this is not linear. I mean, everybody thinks that the pathway to developing a product and becoming successful is linear. You do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do that. It's not. It is a circle, a constant circle that you have to engage in. And so that becomes the basis for commercialization. To start off with, it is a body contact sport. It is infused with a value proposition that you need to develop. Your value proposition consists of understanding who's doing what and to whom. Why are you doing what you're doing? What makes you special? You. Why you in particular? What is your backstory, right? Because
Yeah.
again, invest interest in the person, not just the idea.
Yeah. Well, stories sell, right?
Yeah,
So if there is no story, how are you going to sell it?
yeah. I mean, I've so many examples of this, so many examples from our own experience. It has become an article of faith for us because we've had such a tremendous amount of experience, right? In so many
Hmm.
different things. And there's a common thread that goes through it all. And the common thread is the fact that you need a network of people around you. You know, even the most
Yeah.
successful entrepreneurs have had that. The ones that haven't been successful and have been brilliant, people like Nikolai Tesla, who's my hero, by the way, from the last century,
Well, I think he's a hero for most people.
such a
Most
such
people
an
that know.
but I mean, just look at his life. Look at what he was able to accomplish and not accomplish, and get and get not just frustrated, but not even. Fortunately, he never reached the level of bitterness. Tesla never
Yeah,
established it. Never consumed him because it does consume people otherwise. But yeah,
it does.
yeah, and so those are my points in commercializing. It's become the basis of our practice, of our thinking, of our partnerships, of the people that we speak to on a regular basis, and so on. I hope I was not a little too long an answer, Carolina.
No, God, no. You're good. You speak, during that answer, you were speaking about the importance of community, right? So you have your community community labs and the Venture Fellows program, right? And how do you, I guess the question is, how do these programs combine the hands-on innovations with the real world, and what lessons can from marketing point of view, CMOs and AI leaders and entrepreneurs leading small, medium-sized companies learn from these models?
So, very, very good question, and goes to the heart of what we were talking about earlier on AI. But what I would simply say is you got to understand the domain. You got to know the domain very well, and beyond the domain, how it connects to other domains. Very much so. Very, very much so. And what is it that's driving people at a particular moment in time for a particular purpose that will continue on, hopefully, into the future? Because your accomplishment is only as good as your ability to keep it going for quite some time, right? And therefore, you
Yeah.
need recurring revenue. You need recurring revenue. So, how are you going to keep this translated into a thing that will always go on and on and on beyond this year and the next? It's a big challenge. And you
Always.
you brought up the issue of how do you take this hands-on innovation and translate it into effective kind of enterprises. And the fact of the matter is the same things I was saying earlier. First of all, to recognize that it's a body contact sport, which means that you have to connect with it in a very real and significant way. It's what we do with the venture fellows, right? The fellows themselves have a good a good basis for establishing an enterprise, right? And for growing an enterprise. And they come to us because they want to be able to connect into the broader world. So my first thing is, what is the problem that you're trying to resolve? Why do you think it's a big deal? Who are the people that are using it right now? If they're not using it, how do you know that they're going to use it? In the dot-com world, we had a saying for this: make sure the dogs will eat the dog food. So, when we finish with all of that, then our task is to connect them very strategically and like a pincer with those elements on the outside that are going to be helpful to their ability to execute, either because they want to buy it, they want to pilot it, they want to be able to trial it out, they want to be able to have a demonstration, they want to be able to acquire it, whatever the case might be. And you have to know that going in. You have to know that
Right.
their fundamental interest is in doing one of these things. They may change. It may be that somebody who wants to pilot something may want to acquire you. Sure. But know what the principal aim is when you're going in. Because knowing that principal aim will allow you to position it well enough for them. And
That's great advice.
that's the critical issue that I think CMOs, AI leaders seem to sometimes overlook is that, and you said this very well, we're drowning in information, right? We've got so much information out
We
there.
are.
What you got to do is see the patterns and get the insights that are somewhat specific to what you're trying to do, right? I mean, this is what you do in your digital marketing world, right? All the time, all the time.
Yeah. I
So,
always say, like, for us in digital marketing, I mean, 80% of the work is looking at data
yeah,
to make
yeah,
decisions and decide what are next. And that's why I said, what is our next step, right? So the ChatGPT conversation is like looking at data, right? Looking at what you can find out there for this particular market, you know, help me decide, or at least give me the information I need to make decisions and decide what's best for this company or for this strategy or for this next thing I'm doing, right?
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that really applies across a whole range of job functions and
I agree.
responsibilities. It is, and I think that's what we try to do. This
So you mentioned before that you've had the experience of working in many, many different international markets from Malaysia to Europe. What are some of the differences in similar things that you've seen on digital transformation, marketing, AI commercialization around the world, right? And how do you, well, I guess, how do global collaboration fuel sustainable innovation?
So yeah, it's a big and somewhat complex question. I will say, regardless of whether it's AI or anything else, the thing that's different is scale. First of all, the U.S. Is fortunate to have an extraordinary amount of scale with a considerable amount of complexity and a tremendous amount of diversity and a
Hmm.
tremendous easier acceptance of risk, which
Yes,
underlies everything, right? If you don't accept risk, you cannot breed an entrepreneurial culture. You cannot breed a culture
agree.
of who don't need your permission to access certain things. And unfortunately, that is not the case in much of the world. It is certainly not the case it is not the case in Japan. It is less the case in Korea, although the Koreans, I have to say, have a little different thing, a different way of operating. It is not the case in Europe, for sure. It is not the case
Okay.
in Canada, where I've worked in Canada as well, in both coasts, in Quebec and Ontario, and then also on the other side in Alberta. It is not the case. I mean, and part of the reason why I think it is so is because, and forgive me for saying this, but the US is already also much more accepting of BS. And the reason
Actually,
it
no,
is,
yeah, I think you're right.
and the reason it is, I think, is because it is, in fact, encouraging of dreamers. It's encouraging of people who, I mean, this is the land of P.T. Barnum, you know. This is the land of projecting opportunities that don't really exist. You're creating it out of thin air. So it's not surprising, right, that you have a greater acceptance and of things that may be otherwise known as risky. In fact, that's why Europe is so behind in so many ways, even though it has a more sophisticated way of thinking about the world in many ways, right? And they're trying to make up for it. So you've got France doing a tremendous job on AI, I think, a great job in AI in terms of being able to pull people in from around the world to be able to help them because they recognize that their own culture, their own cultural inhibitions does not allow for the development of new things easily.
Mhm.
But I
Right.
think it's probably the most successful country in Europe at this point in time for the continuation of what we're considering calling the AI revolution. I hate that term, but that's what people are calling it. The UK, yeah, to some extent, I think there's some, in both countries, there's some structural problems, but hey, who doesn't have structural problems? The second big point is that even within the context of all of the stuff I've talked about, the US acceptance of BS, the ability to take risks, the diversity of the population, the scale, you've got something else here that I think matters a lot, and that you've got things that can operate at the state level, which can still be scaled. And I'm here referring specifically to California. California
Hmm.
is the fourth largest economy on the planet. California is the most diverse state in the union. California has, just so we're clear, 160,000 square miles, okay, of land mass, and to go with it, the populations and the diversity of nature and everything else. There are very few other countries in the world that can do that. The one country
Yeah.
in Europe that can is France. France has every single natural, and nature is a very important part of this, by the way, very important. Every single natural element you can imagine in any particular country. It has a coastline, it has a desert, it has a plateau, and it has mountains. Okay?
Hmm.
No other country in Europe has that. None.
Okay.
Zero.
No.
That leads to a different kind of thinking and diversity. I mean, the northern part of France and the southern part of France, two completely different countries.
Really?
Provence and Normandy are as different from each other as, and the regular Canadian population and the Inuit population of the Yukon
Oh,
territories.
those are very different.
Very
They
different,
are
right?
like so
So
different.
what I'm saying ultimately is that those differences, by the way, between these different cultures is why so many folks who are entrepreneurially inclined in all of the countries I mentioned, and you've mentioned as well, want to come here, want to be here, want to have a presence here, want to grow. The difficulty they will have, though, is the same difficulty an innovator here would have. If you don't have those basics in place,
Yeah.
and this is where AI can be very helpful in giving you insights and patterns and what is going on and pulling research together for you and creating a simple value proposition or helping you create a simple value proposition from a ton of data out there. If you
Mhm.
don't do that, you're not going to be able to crack here.
No
This,
matter where you are.
no matter where you are, you're not. And it's just going to make, because I mean, nobody really cares, here, quite frankly, until recently, nobody cared where you came from. Now, of course, it's a whole different issue with the central government, the federal government being the way they are. But certainly in California, which is why California is leading the charge. California is going to lead the charge. And I am so proud that we live here and that we work here because it is at the cutting edge of everything today. Social norms, experiments, and whatever. Different way of thinking about this, right? And Mark Twain, the great Mark Twain, the American writer, or was
Hmm.
it him or somebody else? He says, what they did was they took a big box full of nuts and screws and they overturned it in California and all the nuts came out. Something like that. It just shows that,
Hmm.
it's a place of mad imagination and even more difficult conversations about doing things appropriately. What the problem is here in the US and everywhere is bureaucracy. It's going to ultimately be a real problem.
Everywhere.
Imagine we're talking about a world that is being transformed by our use of AI, and
Hmm.
yet the world that we have to deal with is stuck in a almost an
Bureaucracy nightmare.
yeah. So, that's a
I
big issue.
agree.
And I think all of us have to recognize that, whatever side of the political spectrum we sit on. I think California now has to be able to do a lot because so much has been, what happens with bureaucracy is you add one layer and then you come up with understanding of how that layer worked. And whatever didn't work, you'd be able to get new programs to make it work or to think that you can make it work. But the old ones are still there. And then you come up with a new way of thinking because there were some problems with the second one, but the old ones are still there. And this keeps happening over and over again until you get
It's
this
stacked
gigantic
over and over.
over and you start, it's just so difficult, right? And what it
Well,
does,
it's bureaucracy and greed. It's combined,
yes,
right?
yes, thank
Because
you.
you put bureaucracy and then you put greed, and so they create layers so that they can profit from it.
And
So,
you know
and
what?
there you have it.
and
And now you
and that,
have what.
yeah, it's a survival thing as well, right? Because they want to not just survive, they want to thrive, and they want to make sure that nobody else is able to do so. I don't mean to suggest that there's a real strategy behind this, because quite frankly, very often there isn't. That's the whole problem, is that there isn't a strategy. you know?
There isn't a strategy, but everybody takes advantage of the problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
everybody that can, they
yeah, I
they
think
they they probably do.
that's the back end of the point I wanted to make about,
Yeah,
work, the differences between here and other places. And I do know that one of the things we continue to do is to recognize is to let people know in those other countries that it's not just a straight line. Just because you have something great to offer does not mean that you're going to be able to execute, right?
yeah.
There's so many things you have to take into account. And bureaucracy and the inability to move past a certain point is one of the problems you have to deal with. And it's not just bureaucracy in government, it's bureaucracy everywhere. Bureaucratic thinking is everywhere, right? Everywhere. So it
Yeah.
is something that we have to keep telling people about. And it's difficult because people expect, if you're coming from the US, you should be able to lead us to the promised land, right? I mean, you know what? You're the Messiah. Go and take us to the promised land. That's not how it works.
No, it isn't. And those of us that have had the privilege of coming from those countries into these countries, I call US and Canada not the same but similar. We
Yeah.
know that it takes the promised land is not just a dream. It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it is. Exactly.
Mm.
Now, I will say, about Canada. Canada is a specific example. It's not like Europe at all. Not at all. Very
No.
little. And it's not like the US entirely. It's there somewhat in between. But what I just say about Canada is I do like two things that are really very, very useful in Canada. One is, and this is not a pejorative at all, but people are a lot more considered when they're, there's less arrogance involved in their being able to receive what you have to say, even if they don't do anything about it. you know, they're at least
I do
receptive.
know.
They're at least, and they're kind about that, which can be very important for entrepreneurs in particular, coming up with new things, whether they're using AI or not. They nobody should be treated the way sometimes they're treated here, right? So you got that
Mm.
going. Very important cultural phenomenon in Canada. And the second thing that you have, even though you don't have the kind of scale you have in the US because of the populations themselves, you got some really strong capacity in Ontario and Quebec, especially, and
Hmm.
also in Alberta and Washington, and British Columbia, I mean. So
Oh,
you've got
yes.
some real nuggets there that you can pursue. I remember years ago working with an aerospace cluster in both Toronto, Ontario, and in Quebec, and there was a lot of stuff there. And by the way, I think that Quebec and Ontario have a real future in UAVs because there's
Interesting.
a technical basis for the composites and the design and the propulsion and the configuration of missions. So I do think there's something there. I certainly know that LA is going to be ground zero. Just like I told you, it was ground zero for aerospace and defense in the 90s and up to the 1990s. It's now the ground zero for the new aerospace, which is urban air mobility, drones,
Hmm.
composite materials,
Right.
propulsion, engineering form. By the way, one thing that you may not know, the reason why the gaming industry is based in LA, okay, this is the base for the gaming industry.
Hmm. Yep.
It's because so much of the talent that propelled the gaming industry, computer vision, simulation, and so on, came out of the defense industry here.
I think you told me this when we first started talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the podcast. Yeah.
And people just don't remember
I
that.
didn't know, but
Yeah.
it's really cool to know that.
Yeah, it's such an incredible thing. It's a major asset driver, right?
Yeah.
That's why I think it's going to be very useful for AI moving forward as well.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you one last question. As you know, our audience likes actionable advice. So, what one piece of wisdom would you share with our founders, CMOs, AI enthusiasts, and leaders who want to build resilient, future-oriented organizations in the face of constant change with technology and everything that we're living through?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that question. What I would simply say is there's only one rule, right? Ever that's going to stand the test of time. Be skeptical. Don't
Okay.
ever fall in love with what you are doing to the extent that you do not see what's happening on the side, what's happening behind you, and what has been already happening in front of you. The only
I
way you
love
can do
that.
that is to be skeptical, right? Question
Yep.
yourself constantly. You and I talked about questioning AI, right?
Yep.
We need to question ourselves, our own basis for understanding
Mhm.
anything. And if we can do that, it does two things, Carolina. It humbles you in the face of considerable change, but it also makes you more attuned to change. You're
Yes.
never going to be surprised or disappointed by the pace of change if you're constantly questioning where you're going. That would be my big thing that I would provide.
That is beautiful. And I think I agree.
Thank
I
you.
agree. Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, being skeptical is actually a good quality in a sense. Not for everything,
No, not for everything. You're right. Yeah,
not for everything, but if you're not skeptical, then you're trusting everything you're seeing, and I think you need to be kind of skeptical in a good kind of way to be
yeah,
able to see
yeah.
beyond your own boundaries.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
It was beautiful, to end the episode. Thank you so much to coming out and sharing this space with us. Your insights, your knowledge, I appreciate very much you coming and sharing it. I hope to collaborate again in the future. To our audience, thank you for spending this last hour with us, and we'll look forward to the next episode. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caroline. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.